Our Thursday theme is video, and today we're going to be talking with Michael Coleman, an award-winning director and cinematographer who's worked in Hollywood for 20 years making films about audio, music, and more specifically about the creative people who bring the arts to life. His credit list is amazing. It features titles like Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, Final Cut, Denis Villeneuve's Dune, Brett Morgan's The Rolling Stones' Crossfire Hurricane, just more and more. He's worked with Cameron Crowe, Michael Bay. There's just so many amazing names in his history. He's worked with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and Darren Aronofsky. And if that's not enough, he's also extremely active on platforms such as Vimeo, where Michael's work has been honored no less than 12 staff pick awards there, accumulating an impressive 30 million views. And just one more thing I'll mention quickly. All of the above work are kind of around rock and roll and Michael Bay start movies where noticeably lots of stuff is loud and blows up. Well, back in 2016, I was fascinated to learn that Michael was the associated producer on Patrick Shen's In Pursuit of Silence, a meditative feature looking into the profound value of silence. So hopefully we'll have time to talk a bit about that, but we won't be silent this morning. Instead, I get to say welcome to Office Hours, Michael Coleman.
Thank you, Bill. It's so great to be here. It's amazing to think that, Alex and I are like 2 exits away from each other. We're neighbors, and yet I feel like it's, I don't know, it's great to be here. I'm really excited to be on your guys' show.
It's wonderful to have you. And I always like to start with what it was that originally sparked someone's interest in media and the arts. Was there an early defining moment for you when you realized that working in and around media was the right path for you?
I was graduating. Okay, let's put some numbers on it. I was graduating high school in 2001 and looking at kind of like what my future was going to be. I liked audio. I didn't know if I wanted to be a filmmaker. I didn't know if I wanted to be an audio sound designer or a re-recording mixer. I knew that I wanted to be in media, but media to me was kind of unattainable just because it was the first time that the first time I had a laptop, first time I had, my own camera, or starting to think about my own camera gear. So I didn't really know what specifically I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to be in the media space. So actually I went to college in the Bay Area at a studio basically called Expression College for New Media, which is in Emeryville. Unfortunately it's closed, but at the time it was a 2-year program, and I was kind of looking at like, do I want to do a 4-year college and do like undergrad, or do I want to get right into it? And so I went to Expression College, and it was the best, I think, choice I ever made. I got straight into pretty much, like what is Flash, what is Windows Media Encoder, what is rinse and squeeze, and all these weird technologies which I'd been kind of exposed to for the first time. And I was just trying to see how I could, once I graduate, how I could work for myself, or how I could like get a job or not have to, or find like an entry point into the industry. So I did that, for 2 years, and when I was graduating, one of my adjunct professors, who's a mentor of mine, Jack Douglas, he's this, world-renowned music producer, worked with Aerosmith and Cheap Trick and John Lennon and Alice Cooper. And I said, I want to get a job. I'd like to keep working with you. And he said, well, I'm going to Boston. I'm going to be working on the next Aerosmith album. Let me see if the band will have you along. And it was like this very much almost famous moment of like, okay, sounds great. Like,
yes, please, I'll come.
Yeah. So, I went straight from graduating. Within a few weeks, I was in Boston in the studio with Aerosmith, being asked to be an assistant engineer, or not assistant engineer, but basically a runner, what they call like a T-boy or a T, with the traditional name of just, you're there, whatever the band needs, whatever the engineers need, you're the guy, whether it's getting lunch for the crew or running cables. In my case, I was paying attention to what was going on in the background, and they had a camera there, and I was like, "What's that for?" And they're like, "Oh, well, like the roadies are shooting it. You're welcome to use it. The roadies don't really know how to use this camera." And I said, "Okay, sounds great." And so I pretty much became the guy. Anytime the band was in the studio, I was shooting, and I don't know. For me, it was the perfect kind of colliding of both worlds, my audio background with my interest in filmmaking. And from there, I just never looked back. And I've been so fortunate that I've kind of built a portfolio and a client base built in around this kind of storytelling, short form, long form, around audio and music, and it's been so much fun. I just kind of have to pinch myself and think, like, I don't know how I got here. I just know I kind of one foot in front of the other, and some 20 years later, it's been a fun ride.
Well, it sounds like the totally classic arc from gopher to director. I mean, that's a long journey. Like many directors I've talked to in the past, and I specifically was thinking of Walter Murch when I was thinking about this, an appreciation for sound was a huge part of what drew you into the whole visual arts thing. Can you talk about that a bit, and how having that focus on the audio portion of it kind of smoothed your path into the visual part?
A lot of people ask sometimes, like, what do you do? And you never really want to say I do everything, but in a way, I can do everything. I really enjoy knowing what I'm shooting and how it's going to show up in the edit. So it's like I'm always shooting for the edit. There's so many factors, I think, in filmmaking that play into the overall kind of end, what the final deliverable is going to be. And knowing a little bit about everything always informs the next decision. And so I've never shied away from trying to know too much. I like collaborating. I like working with crews. I like working with my friends. But I also, when you walk into a studio, like we were just shooting some stuff at ILM, and you work on you step in on a mocap stage, and you might not know anything about how it works, but you kind of know enough about the bigger picture that you can kind of navigate it and talk with the other creatives in a way that you can be more collaborative. So for me, sometimes I walk in studios with artists and musicians and engineers, and I know I know everything they're talking about, but I'm just wearing my filmmaker hat, and I'll kind of maintain that relationship. You start talking about microphones, you start talking about workflows and signal chains and compressors, and like kind of the typical. I don't know. Whenever you get these creatives around, that's all we talk about is gear and workflow. So that happens a lot. I just find myself It's a really good way to connect with talent when they can get a sense that you understand their world and you're there to kind of capture their story. So I'm always really, I don't know. I like knowing a lot about everything, but sometimes it's nice just to go in and focus on one thing. But I think it all plays into the bigger picture. So, I think everything's fair game for, any project.
Well, you say the bigger picture, but one of the things that impressed me so much about your resume was that you work on these big things, but you also look at small projects. And I'm thinking, I was reading about in 2016, you directed the John Muir Coming Home thing, inspired by the writings of that naturalist. You also talk about working in Vimeo and the short form things where you've been a staff pick, multiple times. How do you balance, I want to work on big stuff, but I want to work on small things? And do you learn different things in those?
Like the thing that I had an opportunity to work on some pretty big campaigns for Apple and Lexus when I was in my 20s. And I only say that because I felt like the most unqualified person in the room on these projects. Like I was like, I don't know how you guys found me. I mean, I do know how they found me, but it was just like, it's the type of thing where I think sometimes you have to walk in like what you're doing, even if you don't know what you're doing, and learn on the job. I mean, like they say, fake it till you make it. It's not even about faking it. It's just about if you have an opportunity to do something that you haven't done before, that's a perfect sandbox to learn. Hopefully something's not going to catch on fire and it's going to turn into like a disaster scene. But it's just I've never shied away. Like I think when you get a little nervous and you're kind of like, have I checked all the boxes? Do I really like have a handle on what I'm being asked to do? Like, I think I remember the first time I got asked to shoot on the RE Mini camera, and it was for a music video for Alanis Morissette. It's like the director, that's the camera they spec'd out, and it's a big music video for a really amazing artist. And so, like everyone else, you grab the manual, a camera is a camera. It's like, I know what this is. I know how a camera works. I haven't used this one. You do a day of prep, you watch some videos, and then you get on set and you kind of, you shoot from your gut. And I think that's kind of like the best way to describe my process is I think that the second you kind of get complacent or you get a little tired or you get like uninspired, that's when you know you got to change it up. So it's always checking in, whether that's weekly or, you know, yearly. Like, am I being challenged? Are the clients and projects I'm working on inspiring me? And also, is it a true collaboration? I just don't believe in the sense of like I am being hired in service of the project or the client. I kind of come in with the mindset of it's a true collaboration. They're looking to me to, I think, also have creative input. So I'm always building my relationships around that fair kind of understanding of I also have creative buy-in. My name is on this just as much as it is for you. So yeah, I think I don't know. I think clients are great, but clients don't always know what they want. So sometimes you kind of have to tell them, I think what your ideas are bad or wrong, or, you know, and that to me is exciting when I think you can kind of show and flex those muscles.
A little bit of what I'm hearing is you will face chaos. Some people embrace it, learn from it, and move through it. Some people shy away from it and turn away. And the people who make it in this industry are generally the first rather than the latter type personalities. Alex has a bunch of questions too. Alex, I'm going to toss things to you.
Hey, sir. It's really good to see you.
Yeah.
If you're going to give someone advice that they say, I want to get into this business, you can talk about creative, but like, what are the like kind of the basic things that you would tell someone that wants to get into this industry of what they need to be able to do to be successful? What would you tell them?
I think just don't ask other people what they think about of like, don't look for approval or permission from anyone else. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice when I was in college from one of the career advice counselors was like, no one else is thinking about you. Only you are thinking about you. Like, take care of yourself, look out for yourself, because everyone else is busy. You know, it's in a way, it feels kind of isolating, but it just comes down to the fact that there's so much going on in the world and there's so many things that people want to do. And I just think that you have to give yourself permission to say, I think I can have a career in this industry. I think I can, at some point, maybe work on this project or with this client, and just imagine the impossible. Because go ahead.
And what do you think has gotten you those breaks? You know, like, you know, that's what got you into the industry, but there is something that usually shows up. There's some oftentimes trends with folks, but why have people recommended you? Why have you been other than somebody else that they knew?
Yeah, I think there was another thing, which is like I learned pretty quickly that people don't know you exist until they're basically like right in front of you, or like they basically are spoon-fed, like, you should meet this person, you should talk with this person. Like, this is how, like, you basically have to like hand everything to like a client on a silver platter, make it like the easiest type of introduction. So I started calling clients that I was like, I think you should know about me. I think my interests kind of match your interests. And that happened the first time, I think, in a big way for me with KFOG Radio, you know, a big radio station here in the Bay Area. I saw what they were doing, and they were doing these private concerts. I'm like, and they were broadcasting them only audio. I was like, are you guys doing video? And this is, you know, mid 2000s. And they weren't. And so I said, well, let's do a pilot. Like, let's shoot a few concerts.
Where were you shooting those?
In their studio in San Francisco, in downtown San Francisco. We'd roll in with 2-3 cameras, and you know, they were recording the audio for us, and we were getting amazing artists coming through. And to me, it just showed like there probably were, you know, dozens of other people that were qualified to do what I was doing. I just thought it was the perfect timing for me. I just, you know, introduced myself. I wrote the proposal for, here's the pitch, here's how much it'll cost, here's how maybe if you guys are clever enough, you can add advertisers and make money. Like, I was kind of like, here is the whole idea from top to bottom. Just say yes and give me permission to do a pilot. And that's usually like a lot of my approaches. I'll reach out.
And when you said pilot, is that something that they pay for the pilot, or did you say, hey, I'll just come in and do the first one for you?
Sure, I'm sure I did it for free.
Yeah,
I'm sure. And then that you know, that still happens. That's
no, we joke that there's something that we joke about, is that free is the straw that drank 1,000 milkshakes. That there's so many of us that will do things like the first one. I'm really excited about something, and oftentimes I need the footage. Like, you know, like so I think people don't understand the angle is, I need the footage and I need to see if it'll work. You know, like I've never done this before. So I'll do it for free because what I need in front of me is I need content. I need a creator to sit in front of me. And if the creator is willing to sit in front of me, I'm willing to experiment, you know?
Yeah, usually that's the thing. Like the factor will be just like that nervousness around someone saying yes to a project. So they'll be like, well, we don't have budget. We love what you're doing, but we just don't know how to make it happen. It's like, well, just say yes and let me show up and shoot that project. And that has happened so many times. And once you kind of show them like this is what's possible, let's figure out the money. Like the money is not the factor. It's kind of getting shaking the nervousness out of someone and saying, there is potential in this idea. And that video series for just this one instance for K-Fog turned into this just such a fun, many multi-year project. And we started doing the K-Fog booms. We were doing all these great pop-up events that they'd have throughout the year. And it just, once they got kind of over the nervousness of what's possible, it was just kind of like, all the brakes were off.
Yeah. Yeah. Hold on, Bill. We can hear you. What was I going to say? Sorry, I got lost it.
That's all right.
So to get to technical, and what are you shooting with right now?
It's been fun. I was, I think like everyone. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day talking with another filmmaker. It's like we all started on mini DVXs, and then HD came along and we went to Panasonic HVXs, 200s, I think. And that was 1080 was like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine how we're going to handle all this data. And then when I did my first feature documentary with Sony called The Art of Listening, I got an FS7. It was right around when the FS7 came out. And I soaked up the FS7 for as long as I could. And then now I'm on FX6s and FX30s and 3s, and I'm pretty deep in the Sony ecosystem.
And so you're going to do an interview with someone at their space. What's the process? Like, do you go there first? Do you get to do a recce, or do you just kind of go in and hit the ground running?
I mean, a lot of times I'm shooting in locations I'm familiar with. Like, I do a lot of work with Dolby, and I know every floor in their building. I know every nook and cranny. I know every corner, every conference room, every space. And it's always just trying to, find new, interesting backgrounds and stuff. But a lot of times, like, even just last week, we were doing a shoot, and the client will not really have any opportunity to share locations. And you walk in with a lot of stuff, and then you start scaling it down. You start working with, I think, like you have your essentials, basically. Whenever I work with my friends and we talk about, you're bringing this light, I'm bringing this, we have a lot of options. Even when we were just shooting at Skywalker Sound 2 weeks ago for this project, went from a small room to a big stage or to a theater. So you have a little bit of everything. It's pretty much whatever we can fit in our cars. We're not walking in with, 1 ton, 2 tons, grip trucks.
That's what I do.
Yeah, I know. But
I'm like, let's get it done.
No, I know. I mean, it just depends. Like, for instance, like we were doing a project 2-3 weeks ago for Netflix for the show Ripley, because the Emmy season's coming up, and that's a lot of work that I do. And it was just hiring some of my local friends who are showing up. All right, we're gonna have. Here's our spider key light. Here's our hair light. Here's how we're going to do some fill. And we kind of walk in with just enough to know that we can do it correctly and be satisfied. And it's that delicate balance. A lot of my approach is whatever gear I can fit in my car and whatever I can put on a rock and roller cart.
That's the gear.
Yeah.
And what are you using? What are you using for lights?
A lot of aperture. I started with Cineo, and that's what I'm using here in the studio. I had a lot of Cineo. That was like my intro to LEDs. And then, okay, this is going to sound really silly, but I had this kind of thing about never bringing a C-stand. Like, I just was against bringing C-stands to set, just because of, like, once again, how do I get it in my car? How do I get it to location? So I would hire my friends. I'm like, bring your C-stands. I have all my lights. And then I finally like, okay, Michael, this is ridiculous. Like, you need C-stands. Like, it's a tool. You should like not be so.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of aperture from large key sources. From like 5 foot boxes to smaller stuff. Like, we will show up with the big, the medium, and the small options so that we can kind of scale and relight pretty quickly. But a lot of times for the interviews, yeah, you're looking at, big, beautiful key. And then can we sneak in a hair light? Can we work with some of the on-set lights? And I think that to me is, I prefer to have less and figure out how can we work with what we have. So it's that delicate balance of, we have just enough to show that we care, but not so much that you're spending all your time and the client's like, can we start shooting? Like, are you guys done?
How much time do you have from the time you arrive to the time you do the interview? Typically, How much time do you have?
If I'm smart, I'll say 90 minutes. If I'm feeling really good, I'll say an hour. Sometimes
very aggressively. I won't take the job if I don't have 4 hours.
Okay.
I can't do that. I'm always fascinated. Yeah. I'm always like, you live in this rarefied world of fast setup, and I'm just like, oh no, I don't.
You know what? I understand. I mean, I think I'm not opposed. I mean, I just did a big project for Dolby. We were in a studio. We had a whole day pre-light. 5-6 hours, because I knew that's what we needed, and because the project we were shooting, we wanted to have that. The shoot time was too early. The start time was too early, and it's like, no. We need to pre-light. So I'm not opposed to it, but I don't know. If I showed you pictures, I had pictures of like my old setup. It literally me walking in with like a backpack and like a tripod over my shoulder, and it's like, you're just out there in the wild, and it's, to me.
What are you using for mics and recorders?
A lot of times we're doing straight. Okay, so this is funny because of my audio background, I'm very comfortable running my own lavs. I have Sennheiser AVXs I love. Just digging into a lot of Rode microphones, a lot of Sennheiser. Just picked up the Sennheiser 50.
Mm-hmm.
I should know that. So a lot of times everything's usually just boomed for interviews, and then I have a lav as backup that we're usually using as safety.
And what are you recording those into?
Straight to camera, usually.
Straight to camera.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we do the larger roundtable podcast conversations, 4, 5, 6 people. Then we'll get into some of the multi-channel, 6-channel, whether it's the sound devices or some of the obvious Zoom stuff. I mean, it's all the kind of typical gear that everyone's using.
What is the most challenging place that you've shot?
I'm thinking of when I work with the Mondavi winemaking family here in Napa, and they told me, we want to shoot on the top of the hill, like with like full sun, in the middle of like the vineyards. I said, great, and I brought a 4x4, not knowing, well, it could be windy.
Yeah, exactly.
When you look at like some of those memes online of like, what they call like shitty rigs, like it was pretty close to like what would qualify as a shitty rig of like, this is dangerous. Like, challenge, like, I like shooting outside. I do a lot of stuff with like Chef Tyler Florence. He's a Food Network chef. He lives here in the Bay Area, and we do a lot of outdoor kind of live cooking things. And like, to me, always outdoors is kind of, it gets easier if you come in with the right gear. Do we have like big diffusions? Do we have ways to control light?
Right. So
I'm not opposed, or do we have HMIs? Do we have lights that we can work with out in broad daylight? So, I get a little nervous when someone really wants to shoot outside. But I feel like I have enough experience now that I'm not as naive to what I'm signed on to.
I want to read an article from you that's called C-Stand Free Production. I think that would do really well on the interwebs. We have a lot of... Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just... what it was is, like, when I started off, I wasn't buying stuff that was heavy. Like, I wasn't buying lights that, like, require... I was buying, like, the typical RE, the 250s, the 300s, like, the kit that everyone had, the Toto lights with little umbrellas, like... Mm-hmm. It wasn't like I was using.
I worked with someone in Italy that was like, they had this all set up with no C-stands, and because I came in with C-stands, and like, oh no, you don't need it. And they had built this system where it was like this, and it was poles between light stands, right? And then they had the camera here, and they've had sound blankets across here, and then they just hooked lights up all along here, and it was the coolest setup, and it all fit into like a tiny little, like, I don't know, European car, and he would just show up and do the interviews, and I was So I get it. Like I get where you're coming from, and it totally worked, but I still outside of my reality.
Yeah, I've like when I've worked in New York, you show up, you don't have a car. I'm hiring local grips and stuff, and like the grip rolled up, I think like in his like Subaru Outback, and he has like the cases on his roof, and it's packed to the gills, and I think for people who aren't, whether they have the budgets or not, doesn't really matter. We're not bringing big grip trucks or stuff like that.
It's hard.
So,
I think it's hard to go back. Like I think the hard part is you get a transit van with E-Track, and after that everything's like
yeah. I mean,
why are we doing this?
Like right around the pandemic, I got a little bored and I started shopping for transits. For thank God, like they were on back order and it wouldn't show up for 2 years because I would have been the proud owner of a transit. It would have been
so great.
Full of all my gear. I'd be rolling in like everyone else. And to be honest, I didn't need it, but I thought it would be fun. I don't know. Like it's just once you have more space, you have a garage. You're going to fill it with stuff. I
had a garage that was 10,000 square feet that I filled with stuff.
Yeah, right.
You definitely will.
Yeah. So
while we've been talking, I've been seeing all these fabulous pictures show up, and I don't know if we're sending them out to the audience. But do you want to talk through some of the? This got some fabulous on set and everywhere else stuff.
I mean, this is do you guys see this one? Oh, you do. Okay, great. Yeah, like
there we go.
This was like where my career started. An edit room, Final Cut Pro, basically a backpack with a camera, and like that to me was like I am a professional filmmaker. And graduating, it was like, okay, like I can start buying some gear. Let me just go through some stuff here. Here's that Aerosmith stuff I was talking about. Literally just being in the studio. I'm not even sure what that camera is. It was like it had 2 XLR feeds into the camera, and I had like a direct board feed of what they were mixing in the studio.
Does Steven Tyler ever wear a shirt? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, he does. Yeah, part of the brand.
Occasionally.
Yeah, part of the brand. Yeah, that's a spot. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of representative of my clientele. A lot of creatives, a lot of behind the scenes, working with artists and musicians. Whether it's kind of verite style or interview style, I think to me this is the sweet spot. And then a lot of the stuff I do is related to audio and music. So I'm on mix stages. I'm out recording sound effects. Like that picture in the middle is some gun recordings for Transformers. The scoring stage in the top left for Star Trek with Giacchino. You can see with J.J. Abrams. I just find that like there's boundless opportunities to tell stories. Why not tell stories with I think other interesting creatives, and I don't know, I never get tired of just meeting new people, and so for me, like this, like I think out of the pandemic, this is kind of like what came, which was remote. We have access now to pretty amazing directors. Like I said, I do a lot of stuff with Dolby, and we spun up a podcast with them, and the Soundworks Collection, which is a video series that I do. We were starting to get big names, Guillermo del Toro, Ron Howard. Last week I just did some stuff with Tom Hulkenberg for Mad Max, the Furiosa show. Like it's just, I'm so happy that the pandemic happened because it's allowed me to talk with some pretty amazing people, because now like we've gotten over that hump of getting people on video camera and talking with them remotely. And it's just more of kind of a lot of the people I've been working with. A lot of this stuff is traditional roundtable style. This is for Wakanda Forever. I'm at Skywalker Sound for Dolby. Just kind of a 3-person crew walking in, once again doing like an hour-and-a-half light setup, getting good coverage. I think it was a 5-camera shoot. 5 cameras, 3 people. I was running audio.
Nice.
Yeah.
Courtney on our panel has a question too before we get into our audience questions. And for those of you who are listening or watching, remember you can always put your questions in through Makana. Courtney?
Yeah, thanks for being here, Michael. It looks like from the pictures you showed there, you're heavily involved in mainly documentary work or behind the scenes and promotional stuff for musicians. Do you find that market has changed much since DVDs are now disappearing and the DVD extras? I have a friend who, like you, started out directing a lot of these stuff for Disney, DVD extras and documentary behind the scenes stuff on current films. Do you find that market is changing some, and where's the outlet for these kind of films these days that you're producing? Music videos have kind of tapered off in production. MTV is mainly doing reality shows these days. Do you find the market changing? And where's the best outlet for the stuff you produce these days?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I remember when I first was interested in trying to like, how do I even approach working on behind the scenes? I mean, there's amazing companies that are kind of staples in the Hollywood industry that support the behind the scenes. That's one I just did for the upcoming Twisters film with they're called Mob Scene. They're in LA and they just do phenomenal work. I think like we'll always be chasing the format of what is it, streaming? Is it something you can go buy in a store, or like I don't think that'll ever end. I just know that there's a hunger for this type of storytelling. That's what got me into filmmaking, was seeing the people behind the camera do the type of work that I didn't know was even a job. Like I remember the first time I found out about like Disney Imagineering. I'm like, who, how, why? Like it seemed just completely wild to me that people were doing this creative type of work and that you can make a living off of it. So for me, I am of the belief that the more we share the process and show how creatives get to the final result, like when you go see the Marvel, or you see like a big Marvel film or Star Wars or any of these huge blockbusters, the thousands of people that worked on that, you never really see all those kind of touch points of how the work was done. So I just strongly believe in like there's value in showing that process, because that's going to fuel and inspire the future generation. But to go back to your question, I'm less concerned about how people. I think my audiences have always found my work as they start to understand who I am and what I care about, and what my interests are. Like I kind of chase the projects that are most interesting to me. It's like when I reach out and want to work on something, like I said before, like I'm reaching out to the people of like, I want to tell a story about, like for instance, I'm doing something now on Shogun, the FX show on Hulu. I'm good friends with Greg Russell, the re-recording mixer, and I think, he texted me like, hey, have you watched it? I'm like, I can't wait. I'm going to watch it. Like, let's talk about it. And then it's just like, I've done this so many times now. Now it's like you get connected with the studio. The studio is like, oh, you want to do this? And they basically have set up, there's a system now that we can record these conversations remotely, all from my home. So that's just like one way.
What system are you using?
I'm using Riverside right now.
Yep.
And that just came out of the pandemic of like, we were trying to use off the shelf Skype for the long time. And like, that was the best solution. And then it was, there were a few others. I mean, there were so many.
If Zoom had local double-ended recording, would you use Zoom over Riverside?
Yes. Yes.
One more vote.
Let's go Zoom. I
hope someone at Zoom is watching.
I wonder, maybe.
They have occasionally.
When I found Riverside, it was just like, it came out, and I am just like, I will support whoever does the job. Like, I'll use everything. There's a time and place for everything. Like, I use Zoom, I use Teams, I use everything. But for Riverside to me was like, as you saw some of those images, like we literally had Guillermo del Toro in his hotel room on a laptop, and that's it. Or David Fincher in his office with an iMac built-in camera, and like plug your headphone in and like, let's get the best audio. Like that's how rough and wild kind of things were, and still are. Like that's kind of like, unfortunately, we know how bad it can be, but we also know how great it can be with like a little pre-production, and we try to prep clients. Some of my moderators I work with, it's like, what do you have? What do you need? We'll get them the microphone. We'll get them the light. We'll make sure that they have like a good kit, because it doesn't take much to go from like pretty bad to pretty good pretty quickly without spending a lot of money. And I work with lots of people who are not tech. We've worked with Hollywood like Oscar-winning DPs who do not know how to install or like open Chrome, and you're like, okay, like step by step, like we're going to get you from A to B. And it's like, this is kind of what I've signed up for, which is trying to get non-technical people to be technical. I don't know. It's fun as long as my clients are willing to like kind of go through that process with me. Like, no, like give me 2 more minutes. Like we're going to get there. So yeah.
To Courtney's point, though, it's interesting to me. I think I was looking for some music stuff, so I typed music into my Netflix search thing. And because I had done that, I suddenly found myself down low on the scroll lists of Netflix getting all sorts of behind-the-scenes coverage of music videos. So I think the algorithmic approach that people take to, I'm interested in this topic, let me just toss it in a search thing, and suddenly your feed has those. I saw a lot of work, just page after page of work that's like the stuff you're doing, so people can discover it there if they're interested in the artist or the piece. Let's get into our regular watcher questions.
First question's from Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Any simple advice on how to get into cinematography and video editing? How would you approach learning starting all over?
Great question. I remember the first time I got the 5D like everyone else, and it was the first time as a filmmaker I felt just so like, oh, there's a whole side of filmmaking that I never was exposed to. Detachable lenses and basics, how does camera control work? For me, my entry point into filmmaking, I really felt it was like when I got into that side of filmmaking on 5D and started thinking about lenses, started thinking about cameras, and I think all the nitty gritty of filmmaking that becomes very technical and kind of less creative. Just how do I work with this device, which is going to capture something? So I would say for someone starting off, I would use what you have, which is always going to be that phone. I mean, the phone to me is, especially where we're at in this world today, like it's a pretty exciting time to know that we can capture usable footage that will intercut with wonderful, beautiful, expensive cameras. I think people always say like use what you have, but I also would say borrow. I've plenty of times I've rented gear before I buy. I don't think you should be in a position where you're spending money that is out of your means and that becomes a burden. I don't believe in, and I also don't believe in buying gear to justify feeling like you're at like a qualification level, or you feel like, oh, I will be a better filmmaker when I have this piece of gear. I just don't. It's like short lived. You get that piece of gear and you're like, it's not as cool as the YouTube video kind of played it off to be. So I think there's those trappings of feeling like, oh, I need all this gear and then I'll be a filmmaker. Like, oh, not until I have like the best kind of monitor for color then when I spend thousands of dollars on this perfect monitor, then I can finally color correct. There's so many ingenious ways now. You can do it with iPads. You can do it with laptops, with phones. So, yeah, I'm just the believer of like use what you have until you outgrow it, and then start kind of working your way through the next kind of natural piece of gear or kind of like technical challenge that you can kind of put in your arsenal.
Let's go to the next question.
Paul Walhouse in Austin, Texas asks, what are some of your favorite films about audio, music, or about the creative process?
I would say Almost Famous to me feels like when I saw that that's not like a documentary, but when I saw Almost Famous, I was like, all right, someone else has similar hopes and dreams of like being this kind of underqualified person. I really related with that. A lot of my friends who were kind of interested in going into filmmaking, I think, related to that story. Documentary
Cameron Crowe for the win.
Yeah. I would say I've watched some remarkable documentaries that have come out. There's so many biops now. I think that we're in the age of biops. Everyone is telling their story. Just most recently, it comes out tomorrow. The Jim Henson documentary, the one that Ron Howard directed. Just a beautiful. I think I love story. I love watching films when you think you know the person, and then you watch the film, and you're like, no, there's a whole other side of the person. There's more to them than just what I think the public knows. Like stuff like that. I've watched. I watched a lot of artist ones. Billie Eilish, even Jennifer Lopez. Her documentary was fascinating. I don't know. I love being a fly on the wall in a room with an artist and just watching their process. So that stuff is catnip for me. I will watch pretty much any and all biop type of documentaries.
Let's go to the next question then.
Next question's from Jesse Mills in San Francisco Bay Area. Michael, hope you're doing well, my friend. How do you approach telling a company's story in a long format like a doc or a series?
Make sure they know what they're signing up for, because a lot of times I've had clients the top kind of priority is like it needs to be this length, and usually it's for so many reasons that have nothing to do with the story that I usually start there. Why are we telling a 10-minute story? Why are we telling a 30-second, 60-second? I think with the age of social media, clients now feel if I make a video that's 15 seconds or 30 or 60 or even 90 seconds, that I then kind of fill a space it will make my content seen. It'll be a better story. And it's not, a good story is a good story no matter what the length is. I am always walking clients back off the ledge of committing to durations. Like the edit will, unless there's like a real concern, like is this for broadcast? Is there a window of time that we really need to have? Is this a 30-second TV spot? Like that's totally understandable. Otherwise, it's usually like, well, let's just tell the best story first, and then we'll focus on, because if it's engaging, the viewer is going to stay around. How do you get someone to watch a 20-minute piece? Like that to me is a bigger challenge than, I think there's plenty of really, I'm blown away all the time with social media. You have 3 seconds to lock someone in before they swipe to the next piece of content. So I think the long form is just as hard as the short form, and the media should only, it should, we should, it's back. I think the thinking has always been backwards. Like we need to make a 60-second spot and we need to fit your story into that amount of time. And we're going to there's plenty of shoots. I'll have a client who'll do the interview and they'll shoot like an hour interview for a 2-minute piece. I'm okay with that. But like, let's be honest with ourselves. We need to figure out how we can shoehorn all this content into a 2-minute slot. So I'm always thinking about the end deliverable, but I'm also thinking about like how can we tell the best story? Like I'm pretty nonchalant about runtimes. I'm like, whatever the best story is the best story. And everyone, I think, can be happy. Yeah.
We've got a lot of questions backing up here, but Courtney, you wanted a quick gun?
Yeah, I just wanted to have him expound on that question a little bit. In that, when you're looking at a longer form, do you structure it? Do you try and work out a structure ahead of time and then shoot enough stuff to cover that structure? Or do you just shoot as much as you can concerning an event or a person and then work out a structure and tell a story in the editing room? Do you start with a plan before going in, or do you kind of come up with the structure after you see all the footage?
The answer is yes, but the answer is no, because I'm also like, okay, one more. Here's another thing. Things that I don't like. I like, but I don't like. C-stands, 1. 2 is storyboards. I don't like walking into a project and you're like, here's our 20 shots. We need to get this from top to bottom, and everything else is like this project won't be successful until like we basically squeeze all the juice out of this and we have all of our 20 shots. Because like to me, like I say I'm a documentary filmmaker because documentary filmmaking is about finding the story. Like you can go in and know enough, but then you have to also find opportunities for stuff you can never plan for. I think that to me is like the best thing about filmmaking is you can plan all you want, but like I was doing a shoot yesterday, and this is just like kind of like, I don't know how I got here, but it was for the Miss Doubtfire show, that the musical that's coming. I work with Broadway SF, and so the actor who plays Miss Doubtfire was in full dress and costume, and we spent the day in San Francisco going to all the spots. And at the last shot of the day was we went to the Miss Doubtfire house, and we're there on the hill, and we're in the middle of the street. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool background. Let's get that. And in that very moment, probably like 20 guys in lederhosen on bikes came riding down the hill.
Only in San Francisco.
Only in San Francisco. And like the client was like, did you get that? I'm like, we totally got that. And like Mrs. Doubtfire giving high fives to bikers in lederhosen. Like, yeah, that's going to be the shot that it's going to make the edit, but you can never plan for that. So I think as someone who shoots and edits, I'm always thinking about kind of like, where can we find opportunities to find just the unexpected? Yeah.
I have a director who calls them happy accidents. Always keep your eyes open. Yeah. Next question.
This one's from me. Do you find clients always say yes to being sent kits for remote interviews?
Great question. I feel like I work with more clients that don't even know what a kit would be. They would like, it's interesting. Like I work with I work with amazing technical, like, Dolby is doing just future technologies, Atmos, Dolby Vision. Even, you had, Myers, Tom McCarthy from Meyer Sound on, who's a client of mine. Meyer Sound has been a client for a long time. Like when you see the technology that these companies, I mean, I love working. It's like the companies are run by engineers. They're not run by filmmakers. They're not run by people. I mean, that's like I said, like that's why they're hiring me usually. So I guess like the best answer to your question, most of the time, I don't get into those types of conversations unless I'm doing music videos, unless I'm doing multi-camera stuff, unless there's other reasons for a kit to be kind of spelled out or like there's more involvement. I don't know. I usually don't run into those instances as often.
Let's go to the next question then.
Next one's from Paul Wall, who's in Austin, Texas. Please talk about your experiences on Dune and the 12 Vimeo films that are staff picks.
I'll start with Vimeo. So I signed up for Vimeo before YouTube was YouTube. Well, I signed up for Vimeo because Vimeo supported HD when I started. And to me, it was like, thank God as a filmmaker, like my work is finally going to be seen as it was intended online. Because I was all my work that I've was producing starting off and still really is, or have been producing is online. So I signed up for Vimeo and I started making these behind the scenes videos under the Soundworks collection. And I just started showing people that I think there were, once again, like I hadn't yet created a name for myself through Soundworks collection because I was doing it kind of under the guise of Mix Magazine, which is, if you know Mix Magazine, they're a Bay Area magazine that I was working with. And I started making phone calls saying, this is Michael Coleman from Mix Magazine. I'm here. Like, I want to tell your video. They don't know who Michael Coleman is, they don't know who Soundworks collection is. But the editor was like, no, like, go ahead. There's the phone numbers. So I started shooting these videos, and a lot of them at Skywalker Sound. And Vimeo to me was, I don't know, a beautiful community of artists all around the world before social media became social media that we could share and see other people's work. And then, I don't know, just very organically having one, more pieces being staff picked. I don't know what else to say about it. Was just I was producing pieces and telling stories that interest me, and sure enough, other people started, catching wind of it. And within 2 years, I had this new video series called Soundworks Collection that I had tens of thousands. And I started. The first big one I did was for Michael Bay for Transformers. The second one. And the same guy, Greg Russell from Shogun, who's Michael Bay's mixer, emailed me and said, I've seen your videos. I love what you're doing. Would you like to do Transformers? And I'm like, excuse me, come again? Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is not part of the plan. And so I shot the video for them, and Michael Bay had a website at the time, and he put it on it. And then some of those films started making. Scott Pilgrim versus the World with Edgar Wright was one of the first films that made it onto the home release on Blu-rays. The studio started asking, like, these are wonderful little videos. Can we start putting it on our home release? So that started becoming a reality. But it all started with Vimeo. Within the community, if you go back and look at the early days of Vimeo, it just was a wonderful community. I mean, it still is, but it's just now the landscape has changed so dramatically that, you could find great inspiration on pretty much any social media platform. So
the Dune experience really quickly.
Yeah, Dune. Once again, opportunity with the sound team, and then pretty much I come in that sweet spot before the film has come out and after they've finished their final mixes. And there's usually, hopefully, if they're not on a crazy schedule, there's maybe 4 to 6 weeks. So I slide in right before the film has come out. I have a chance to see the film, and we probably do sit down interviews with all the talent. I have access to the EPKs from the studio, which have all the behind the scene clips. And that's, I've been doing that now since, Soundworks Collection is since 2009. But it's gone to a point now where the studios are like, they start asking, like, I know you're doing this for Soundworks Collection, but can we hire you? And it's like, yeah, you can hire me. Like, yeah, I'm a freelance director. I'd love to work on your projects. And that's evolved into just this past Oscar season. We did big pieces for Maestro for Netflix and Barbie. Last year did a big piece for All Quiet on the Western Front, which won the Oscar for music. So I don't know. Dune was just another project, but one that, once again, like working with good friends that I've met over the years, and pretty much you make a phone call or a text message, because like the sound team is one text message or one degree of separation away from the director. Like that's the final stage. So the director isn't they've survived the war of production. They've made it through post. They hopefully have a final they have a final picture, and now they're on the quiet soundstage, and they're mixing their films, and they're working with their composers, and it's it might be chaotic, but it's more peaceful. Like they're at the home stretch. So
they're in recovery mode. Next question.
Robert Shoji in Los Angeles asks, where can we see examples of Michael's latest work?
I put a lot of stuff on colemanfilm.com on my portfolio. I've talking about social media like 9:16. I don't believe in 9:16. I didn't understand it. I didn't fully grasp how my work translates. We're producing for one frame. I'm not producing for a vertical frame, but then when clients start putting that on their deliverables list, you can't say no, so you have to figure out ways to make it best work. So I'm always shooting with 9:16 safe, but I just in the past a little over a month ago I went into the well of projects from Soundworks collection, and there's probably 80, 90 projects that I've pulled out, and every day, Monday through Friday, I'm releasing a new kind of snippet on the Soundworks collection TikTok and Instagram. I had just last week, there was a piece that was done from Godzilla, Edgar Wright's film. And it was within 2 days, it did a million views on TikTok. And I'm just like, I feel like a fish out of water, but I want to learn how to make social media content better, because this is obviously the landscape. So a lot of my work is on social media, but colemanfilm.com is a good place to check it out.
Here you go. Next question.
Next question's from Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Do you have any interest in any VR 180 or 360 filmmaking?
I worked with is it Jaunt? Wait, Jaunt? Is that right? Jaunt? Alex, is that right? Jaunt?
Yep, Jaunt.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, Jaunt was a VR company that spun out of there in Palo Alto, and I worked with them for a while. And that was, I think when I see the technology, it's kind of like when you see a new technology, you're like, it's not going to be around in, a year. And you kind of wait and see. I am of the opinion that I think for the right story, those technologies are wonderful. And I think when Alex got his Vision Pro, I was like, I'm not going to buy one, but I know you have, and I'm going to, I want to see it.
Yeah.
I'm not an early adopter, but I am a believer in the format. I've played enough. I think gaming to me is very, very interesting, but I don't know. I like 180. I did a project for Four Seasons Hotels with the chef Tyler Florence, and it was a really fun pilot project. We did like 3 or 4 of them, and those were 180 videos for Oculus, and it was interesting, but it wasn't as exciting because it was kind of like you have to find your frame, and it was kind of you set it and you don't move it as much. Like there's different rules when it comes to VR and in that world. So I'm very interested. I'm not against it. I'm not as excited about filmmaking in that space quite yet. But I mean, that is the future. I think there's plenty of opportunities to play in that space. So I'm not opposed to it. I'm having fun still in just the normal world.
Next question.
Next one's from Tommy Shanson, St. Paul, Minnesota. Was there a work that set a mark for you early on that inspired you to take this road in life?
Like a single piece of work? One more time out. Maybe say it. Single piece of work?
I think he's looking for a single, like, did you see something and say, I want to, like, because I will admit, for me, I saw Star Wars when I was 7 years old, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to do whatever that was. Like, I was very, very into it after that, and ended up doing that 20 years ago or 20 years later or whatever.
Yeah, I think, honestly, it was probably watching the DVD extras on something like Jurassic Park. Just kind of, not, like I said before, realizing that you could have a job in this type of industry. Like, filmmaking was a different world, 20 years ago. It wasn't, you'd have to have so much gear and so much money to even try to approach it in a way. Like before web video, before YouTube, and before this whole landscape that we obviously like swim in now, there was no entry point. So I think it was seeing all the behind the scenes projects that was like, oh, there's creatives and technicians behind the scenes working on these things. I don't know how they do it, but I'm super curious, and I kind of want to be a fly on the wall. And then I don't know, I I honestly, for the first few years, felt like imposter syndrome. Like I didn't feel like I was qualified, even though I spent all this time in college learning about audio recording, like until I started working and have a few years under my belt and started really shaking out, I think, the nerves and having enough experience on set and working with clients that you start finding your own kind of footing and your own voice. It wasn't until a few years I started realizing, oh no, I do have a voice. I do have an opinion. I do. Yeah. There's a uniqueness that I want to keep exploring. So yeah, but it all started with seeing other people that I was like, oh, that looks interesting. I want to do that.
We still got a lot of questions in the queue, so hopefully we'll burn through as many as we can. Next question.
Robert Shoji in Los Angeles asks, what new tech is Michael integrating into his workflow?
New tech. A lot of, something that I've been doing. We just welcomed our second child, almost 3 weeks tomorrow. So I can't leave the Bay Area. I am going to be here for the foreseeable future.
Sleep deprived much?
Yeah. But what I'll
get
say,
one of those 12K baby monitors.
yeah. So here's the thing. I think there are wonderful off the shelf. I mean, this is honestly coming back to office hours. The pandemic happened, and we're in a different world. And like, how can we do remote production but still maintain quality? And when I found office hours, you guys were all talking about all these wonderful kind of solutions. Like, is this going to work? And I was asking the same thing. It was the first time I ever used like an ATEM. I was like, oh, other people are thinking about these types of pieces of gear. So for me, like doing remote shoots, so I just did this one for Ripley for Netflix, 2-camera shoot down in LA, sending camera feeds. I was still doing the interview with the talent over Zoom, but I don't know. I'm so interested in finding more ways that I don't need to get on a plane, but I can still creatively do the interviews. I don't need to be the one on set showing up, making the flights, bringing all the gear. I really believe in like working with local crews. I don't like flying in with all my stuff and not working with local crews. So to me, I'm trying to find new and different ways to work with local crews without ever having to leave my studio. Because at the end of the day, the end result is just as good as if I was there. So what's the reason for physically eating up a day when I could just really spend an hour talking with the talent and hiring my friends who are in LA and did a phenomenal job. So that to me is kind of what I'm interested in.
Next question.
All right, this one's from me. What's your solution when dealing with indoor shoots where there is a large window that you can't avoid? Do you ND film the window or use a lens filter or some other method?
Just pan the camera away from the window. Just don't have it in your back. I like
change the shot.
Yeah, I mean, so many times clients would be like, "Oh, like we have this beautiful view." I'm like, "That's great. It's a beautiful view. We don't have the space. We don't even have the time or the lights to make it work, and like you guys don't have the budget to make it work. So like, maybe we can creatively. I don't know, like." I'm not opposed to making it work, but unless I walk into a location I know we want to incorporate, unless there's a reason to incorporate a window, I don't think we really need it. I think there's a better background that we can find, or there's a more creative way that we can use the space that we have to come up with a better picture. So I don't know. I mean, it's
I often mention cost and time. Like,
yeah.
Hey, that sounds like a great idea. And we're going to need HMIs, and we're going to need this, and we're going to need this, so we need an extra 6 hours. And
I mean, yeah, like,
but we're game if you want to do it.
Yeah,
and then they're like,
how long are we going to be here? Is the sun going to shift? Yeah. So like this beautiful shot we have is not going to be the same in a few hours. So like, I think we're adding more work onto the plate than is needed. So yeah, it's something that I usually avoid.
Jesse Mills in San Francisco Bay Area asks, when do you decide that you need to hire a sound mixer?
When I know Jesse is free. Good friends with Jesse.
That's a new version of a Cochrane, which is throwing a question to ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next question.
Dave Trotman in Edmonton, Canada asks, have you ever played with time-lapse?
All the time, just yesterday. I love time-lapse, and to me, the time-lapse solution, if there's not a need, I will grab a GoPro and I will just yesterday, when we were doing the Missed Doubtfire shoot, there was a 4 or 5 hour hair and makeup treatment being put on. And we got this amazing time lapse that's going to be great for the edit. And it's just hardwire the GoPro for battery, frame up your shot. It's shooting in, like 5.7K, plenty of room, plenty of resolution. I do that with Meyer Sound. We'll do huge, festivals, and we'll time lapse the whole day. I love doing time lapse with GoPros. And that's part of my kit, is usually walking in with a few GoPros and doing time lapses. So yeah, there's a sweet spot for that.
Next question.
Another question for me. Do you use autofocus in any situations, or do you rely on manual focus pull via the camera operator?
Until I got the FX6, it was all manual. And then I got the FX6 and the FX30 and bought some native Sony glass. And my life, it was the type of thing where I know it's been around forever, and autofocus is we were in the city yesterday shooting this verite style, chasing subjects that are literally like guerrilla style, like man on the street. There's a time and place for autofocus, but there's plenty of times when it's just like that autofocus glass usually has a certain type of characteristic. It's too sharp. It looks a certain way. So I have plenty of Zeiss glass. I have some vintage or semi-vintage contact Zeiss kit that I modded myself. I think the right tool for the right job. But I love shooting autofocus. I'm never in a situation where I have someone pulling focus for me, with like a remote wireless situation. It's just not that need usually for me. But I love shooting manual lenses. But it's just whatever the project calls for, I think. It's a little bit of both. They're both challenging in their own ways.
And our last question.
Last one's from Douglas Carmichael. Have you done any work with in-camera visual effects or virtual production? What do you think of how ICVFX will change production workflows?
Yeah, great question. I have a good friend, maybe he's on listening, Jim Godolnik, who is a visual effects like volume supervisor. And when I talk with him about his pipelines and workflows, and he's doing phenomenal work, like big Hollywood stuff. And I just think there's such a technical right now, and like it's such a technical lift. I work with plenty of DPs that use volume, and when you start to understand kind of like what's needed, how much pre-production, how much budget, how much prep, I think there's great uses of volume. I don't think it's a substitute. It's not going to be. It's a tool like anything else, but for me, it's like I think it's a specialist, like a stunt person is. Like you bring in the specialist when you're dealing with a specialty type of craft. I just don't see it becoming like for everyone, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, in the near future, volumes will be more approachable, just like everything else has become more approachable. So I'm excited for it, but right now I'll leave it to the experts.
We've been talking with Michael Coleman on Office Hours today. Michael, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have you here today, and we hope we can get you back again as soon as possible. As always, our gigantic thanks to our producers, everybody who added questions to the queue today. You really do drive this show every day, and your questions, again, were fabulous to help drive this discussion. To the panelists who show up every day and add their expertise on a volunteer basis to make the show what it is. Thank you to you guys and everybody else, the women who have been here and everybody else, and our incredible back-end crew distributed all around the world who comes together every day to make Office Hours possible. Don't forget, After Hours starts right after we shut this down. The Trolloc Traversal today, we've traveled 70,000 miles. That's how far you would have had to gone to get this expertise. 112,000 kilometers, and that's equivalent to 551 million bananas for scale. See you tomorrow.
That was great.
That was fantastic. I've not heard that end stinger. You guys are really. Those are some good stats.
Especially
bananas. I gotta add that to my. Yeah, this is our footprint. Banana footprint.
Well, it's exactly. There's carbon footprint, banana footprint. It's the otherwise known as the potassium pile.
Pandering to Redditors.
Yeah. I mean, we're really worried about the what happens when the imperial banana is no longer valid because of It goes out, then we're
I
talking
think
about
climate change is
plantains.
affecting the length.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
everyone's
terrible.
everyone's talking about GPUs. They need to be talking about bananas.
Yes, exactly. The
Banana
banana scale. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, thank you
Michael,
guys.
that was fabulous. Thank you.
So great to have you on.
Yeah, I really appreciate.